Right, well, like me. So, MP Priestley, you are a Riparologist. What's a Riparologist?
Well, a Riparologist, I suppose, is somebody who's interested in the study of the Whitechapel murders and the Jack the Ripper case in particular. It's like,
Right.
you know where the term Riparologist actually came from?
Go on.
It was Jeremy Beadle coined it. You remember Jeremy Beadle? Beadle's about,
Yeah.
and you've been framed. Yeah, he wrote a foreword in a Jack the Ripper book, and he was, he wrote about something, this new study of Riparology or something he wrote, and then it caught on. Yeah, and that's where it came from.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you're from the north of England. You're from Sunderland. So what's a lad, right? Growing up in the northeast, how did you get into Jack the Ripper? Because you've done a couple of books, which we're going to talk about in a bit. But where did Jack the Ripper come from with you?
True crime and serial killers was always a fascination of mine. So the first true crime book I ever read was about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. So my mum had a copy of that, and I just found that fascinating. I never read anything like that before. And then after that, it was Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer and all of those kind of guys. And then, but if you're reading a book about Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or whoever, somewhere in there it'll mention Jack the Ripper. It's like the king of the cold cases. So I think with such an interest in true crime, and then actually moving to London in the first place, I think it was I was always going to gravitate towards the case, I think.
Yeah. So how did you become to, because obviously me and you spent a bit of time about 6 months ago. You live in the heart of London, Black London, the East End. Unbelievable view at the top of your flat where you can see the whole of the city. So how did you didn't just wake up one morning and think, right, I'm going to go and study Jack the Ripper. I'm going to go and do Jack the Ripper tours. How did you, a Sunderland lad, end up in the East End?
Well, I first moved to London in 2005. So I came down in 2005 and did a bunch of different jobs and all sorts of different things. And then about in 2012, I decided I was going to start writing my Jack the Ripper book. So I didn't know anybody in the true crime scene or whatever at that point, but I decided I was going to write that. And then when I got seriously into the writing, then I met a few people, and then I met the boss, and he was like, well, we need a tour guide. You want to do it? And that's kind of how I fell into it.
So for people who don't know, I mean, I've just written a chapter now, and it's called something like a business which makes a killing. And we've all seen Jack the Ripper films, the books, the mugs, the T-shirt, but the Jack the Ripper, I don't know, franchise, if you like, there's a lot of money. And if you walk around the Whitechapel or Aldgate or Mile End, Spitalfields on an evening, I mean, you will see a lot of Jack the Ripper tours. So to give people an insight, how many tours is there on an evening? There's lots, isn't there?
Well, I mean, I think there's about half a dozen different companies do it, but I think you don't necessarily see them all the time. So I think if you come along on the weekend, it's always super busy. You'll see groups around, but if you come along on a Monday and Tuesday, it might not be, it might be too bad. But I'd say there's 6 main companies, and then there's at least a dozen other people who just do a tour at the weekend or just on special occasions or whatever. But certainly, like you say, if you're going to be walking through Spitalfields at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, you're going to see a bunch of Jack the Ripper groups walking through the area.
Yeah. So was it hard to adjust from the northeast to moving to the East End, or was it just something, like, was it, I mean, I love London, but I couldn't live there, but I am actually in awe when I walk around the East End. I never have my earphones on. I'm looking about at everything, I'm taking everything in. Is it become like that for you, Mick, or is it just part of the furniture now and it's just boring?
But I've been here since 2005 now, so you kind of get used to the busyness, you know what I mean? And it's like, but when you're so interested in the history and that kind of thing, yes, I mean, I think the biggest thing you get used to, or the biggest thing you need to get used to when you move down to London, is just the busyness of it, especially when you come from Sunderland or the northeast or wherever. It tends to be quite quiet up there on the seaside. And then I used to live in Camden before I lived in the East End, and I used to live in Soho for 3.5 years. After that, so I was super busy down there. So I mean, I think after living in Soho for 3.5 years, it was a breath of fresh air to come to the East End.
Right. And so how many days a week do you work talking and taking people around Jack the Ripper? How many days a week do you do that?
Like me personally, or like the company?
Not you.
Yeah, me personally, I do 5 or 6 days a week. I'll be on usually Sunday, Monday, or Monday, Tuesday is my weekend, and then I'll be there the rest of the time. But as a yeah, like as a company, we do it every night of the year except Christmas Day, possibly maybe not New Year's Eve, but pretty much every day of the year we do it.
So I take it the busiest nights of your calendar are Halloween, or say for instance the dates of the double event and all that. Am I right in saying that?
Particularly Halloween. It's like when I first started the job, I thought that I thought dates of the murders or of certain events I thought would draw big crowds down. But something I realized once I started doing the job, I think the majority of people who come on the tour, it's something you know a bit about. You've heard the basics, you saw a movie or something, but I think only few people, to be honest with you, tend to be so interested in the case or whatever, it's actually turn up on an anniversary night. I think some people do, but it's like, yeah, the busiest night far and away is Halloween, and the whole week leading up to Halloween would be chaos as well. Second busiest day of the year is Valentine's Day. Can you believe
that? Is it really?
Who goes on a nice romantic Jack the Ripper Valentine's walk? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. There's always big crowds on Valentine's Day as well.
Yeah, and you, I mean, I'm just almost finishing this book, and I read your first one, and I handed it over to Martin O'Neill. I mean, you met him. You actually took Martin on a tour. I'm going to be sending him this link actually. So he did tell me, because I was with you one day. I think I was with him the day after, and he remembers because obviously Martin was the manager of Sunderland. Is there a lot of other celebrities that you've took for Jack the Ripper tours?
Yeah, a few now and again. Like every now and again, you'll see somebody comes along. So for name dropping off the top of my head, we had I took Charlie Sheen on a walking tour a while ago. He was a nice guy. I had Kelly Osbourne on a walking tour once. Martin O'Neill obviously has been along. I had Vinnie Paul out of Pantera, the heavy metal band. He came on the tour. He's passed away now. He was on the tour. He was about 4 years ago, I think he was. Then on the other tour guides as well. I think it was one of the guys out of One Direction went about 6 months ago. I think Russell Brand or somebody was on the tour in somebody else's group once. But yeah, every now and again you'll totally see a familiar face pop up occasionally.
Victor Meldrew as well. Is that I'm right in saying that?
Yeah, Richard Wilson, isn't it? Yeah, I think he. Yeah. I think that was before I started doing the job. I have seen a picture of one of the tour guides with the arm around him. I'm assuming he must have gone on the tour, but that was before I started doing it.
I mean, I've spoken to certain Riparologists, well, quite a lot actually, and you'd be amazed. Like Simon Cowell and all that have just paid for like private ones. Obviously the Jack the Ripper community, if you like, it is a small community, and there's a lot of people, the experts, Richard Jones, Lindsay Siviter, yourself. Martin Fido, God rest him, no longer here. Donald Rumbelow, Stuart Evans, Paul Begg, that Russell guy. So the 10 Bells pub and all this. So when you're about, Mick, do you see a kind of a lot of faces? Do you know each other?
The other tour guides, or like the Rip Road. Yeah, I mean, I know all the other tour guides now, and like a lot of the names you just named there. Like I know most of those people, but kind of passingly. I've seen them at. There's always a crime event or something like that. So I've met like Donald Rumbelow. Used to do walking tours quite recently. He's been writing Ripper books since the 70s, hasn't he? He's one of the he's old school.
He's retired now. He's in his 80s, isn't he? But
is he really? He's until I think the last time I saw him doing the tour was a few years ago. But he used to be all the time. He had a giant group of them every night as well.
Yeah. Do you think it's something...
Lindsay? I get on with.
Lindsay Siviter.
Yeah. I know Lindsay well. Yeah, I've known her for a long
time. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've watched every single thing on YouTube. But to walk around the East End, there's so much history. It wasn't only Jack the Ripper. Joseph Merrick was about. Oscar Wilde was coming to the East End, the Rent Boys. Lewis Carroll, the creator of Alice in Wonderland. Walter Sickert. There was lots of kind of different names around at that time, wasn't there?
Yeah, And it's like something great about the East End as well. Everywhere you go in the East End, there's some history somewhere. Even things that have nothing to do with Jack the Ripper. I mean, a lot of the houses around here are 300 years old, or even more in some cases. And you think, yeah, just in this area, there is so much has happened in this area throughout history. Yeah, it just fascinates me around here.
Yeah, do you think so? Could you ever? I mean, obviously Sunderland was kind of famous for wasn't exactly a serial killer, but he was called Wearside Jack, and yeah, you know, he's gone now. I think he got 8 years in prison or something. But I mean, do you think you'll see? Could you ever imagine living in Sunderland again, or is that you finished with the East End now and you're going to forever?
No, I mean, I don't know if I would live in the East End until I'm 110, but it's like I think. I don't have any plans to go back to the Northeast. It's only 3 hours on the train anyway. If there's any reason to go back and jump on the train and go, but no, having spent basically my entire adult life in London, I kind of consider myself to be from here. Really, it's nice to go up and see friends and family or whatever. But yeah, I don't think I'd be moving up there. I'm definitely kind of settled in here now.
Yeah. So what made you write? So your first book, which I sent to Martin, which was the thin one. What was that called again?
Is it this one, the guidebook one?
Yeah. So
yes,
how did you come about doing that then?
The guidebook.
Yeah.
Well, the guidebook, it was I actually wrote the guidebook after I wrote the big book. So the guidebook it's a souvenir guide for the Ripper tours. And it's got all the details in there. It's 5,000 words. But then yes, the big book is an entirely different beast altogether. You got your copy right there. And yes, that one I think. The reason I wanted to write that was because, I mean, as you well know, there are dozens of books on Jack the Ripper, and it's like all of varying quality. I think
200 plus.
Yeah, I have no doubt. And it's like, but something that always struck me is if you buy a book about, say, Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer or Fred West or somebody like this, and you read the book, brutal, no messing about, true crime, but they're always written by, or they're usually written by either a retired detective on the case, or at the very least somebody who knows the case and true crime intimately, because you don't want to write a book and say a load of nonsense and somebody's going to be upset and you can't do that kind of thing. But when you buy a book about Jack the Ripper, I think because everybody's been dead for 100 years, all sorts of authors, even some of them who are seen in quite high regard, write all sorts of nonsense in there. Or they'll be real thin on details, or they'll say, this happened, then that happened. That means this. No, it doesn't. Not in every other case ever read. I thought if I'd not written the book and I'd been hit by the bus before I'd done it, for the rest of time, people would just believe all the conspiracy nonsense. Oh, it was the royal family and it was this and that. And I thought, somebody has to write a book, even the better ones. And there's a lot of them are okay, but they're thin on details. And I thought somebody has to write the proper one. This is the definitive account. There is no conspiracy nonsense in there. There's no wild guesses. It's all from the original files and reports. This is what really happened. And so there it is. Nearly 4 years in the archives, and yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So this book, One Autumn in Whitechapel, I'm going to put the links for both of Mick's books. So that's one. I'm about 2/3 way through. If someone put a gun to your head and said, right, if you don't tell me who Jack the Ripper was, you're dead, right? Who would you? You've told me this before. I know the answer, but who is your number one suspect? Because there's hundreds, probably 15 to 20 heavyweight, decent, really decent, proper ones. But you know, in your opinion, from your thorough research, and you are an expert, tell me your views.
Albert Bachert was Jack the Ripper, Bachert. His parents were German, but he was born and raised in Whitechapel, and he's a suspect that's never been suggested before. Nobody's ever written books about him. If you were to buy a really good sort of research book, like the Jack the Ripper A to Z, if you have that kind of thing, or some of those research books might mention him passingly as a member of the Vigilance Committee or this kind of thing. But having done all my research, I am convinced it's him. I'm open-minded, but you'd have to come up with something pretty good to change my mind. So Albert Bachert, he was born and raised in the Whitechapel area. He's the right age. He fits the right description. He's got a criminal record for all the things you'd expect a serial killer to have today. He was constantly injecting himself in the investigation. He told the police that he'd met the killer and spoken to him on a couple of occasions. He told the police that the killer was writing letters to his house to threaten him and warn him of murders and all this nonsense. He said that the killer had written graffiti on the wall of his house. but it was magically washed away again before the police could see it. He then turned up uninvited to the inquest of Francis Coles in February of 1891, which was attributed at the time as a Jack the Ripper murder. He turned up uninvited to the inquest on Whitechapel Road, demanding to be on the jury just as they were about to be taken to view the body in the mortuary, then threw a big fit when wouldn't let him, to such a point that the coroner told him if he didn't sit down and behave himself, he was going to have him removed from the building. And in my opinion, he just wanted to see the body in the mortuary. I'm convinced he's a pervert, and I think that's what he wanted to do. I'm convinced he's a killer. But he worked as an engraver. So they used to engrave the copper plates for the banknotes, or if you want your name on your necklace or something, he's your man. But the reason that's interesting is because at the time, something that's kind of been forgotten a little bit now, the Metropolitan and the City Police had teams of detectives looking for men who were ripping off women with fake coins. And there were numerous instances in the area where these women had met a strange man. He'd given them this money in the night. They'd gone down a dark alleyway somewhere and he'd attacked them, but then they'd screamed and struggled, scared him away. He ran off, and then you realize that these coins he'd given you were bogus and had been machined around the edges and polished brightly, it was said, to look like more valuable ones. The police believed he might have taken like a farthing, which is sort of like a dirty sort of 2p kind of coin, and then polished it super brightly like a gold coin and machined it around the edges to look like a half crown, kind of like if I give you a fake 50 in the dark in today's world, this kind of thing. So the police believed whoever the killer was, this is what he was doing. He was manipulating these coins. Albert Backett, as an engraver, he would have had all the tools and the knowledge and the expertise and whatever to do that in his own house if he wanted to, where he lived by himself. And then in 1889, they actually took him to court. He was arrested, taken to court, and charged on 2 separate occasions for passing counterfeit coins exactly like that in a number of pubs. And I thought, what another amazing coincidence. And when he did actually get arrested for that, he told the police, yes, you see, I was indeed passing the coins, but it wasn't my fault. The ringleader of it was this other guy over there. And then the police claimed that they had a photograph of him, to which Albert Backett said he said he would like to go down to Scotland Yard because he's such a nice guy, and identify this photograph for the police. And you think, really? Like, I think today this would be a big red flag. It's in the middle of the investigation. He's standing in the middle of he can't seem to stop injecting himself in the investigation. He's right in the middle of the murder zone. He ticks every box you'd see today. I think if this was happening now, far and away, Albert Backett would be the #1 person the police would want to go and speak to.
Right. Because there's a saying, isn't it, the murderer always returns to the scene of the crime. And that sounds very much. Can I ask you a question, though, Mick? Why is he, if all that is so true in that, and why is he not a more notable suspect? You know, listen, we've all heard of the Kosminskis, and you know, I mean, the Dr. Tumbletees, which is a lot older than what the people said, but they're more notable. Druettes and Ostrogs, but he's one of the less ones we hear about. Why is that?
A lot of the suspects, like some of them you just mentioned, I said the Kosminskis and people, I mean, they weren't put forward till 1896, and it was Melville McNaughton put them forward. Michael Ostrog, Montague Druitt, and Kosminski were put forward in 1896. And then a lot of the other suspects, like, you know, Walter Sickert or these types of people, were never even mentioned. Decades and decades after that were these people's names ever mentioned. When the actual case was going on, there were extremely few suspects, and I mean a very small list of people that were ever actually genuinely suspected to be the killer. So if you Google Jack the Ripper suspect now, there's hundreds and hundreds of them, but nobody ever said that at the time. And I think Albert Backett, like everybody else, flew under the radar. I think if this was happening now, I think he would make himself look extremely suspicious. I think police at the time must have found him irritating. They must have, oh God, here's this guy again. He's got another clue. I say, what is this guy's problem? He keeps coming back and won't leave us alone. And I think he must have been seen surely as a nuisance. But I don't think anybody took it any further than that. So I don't think, it's not like the police ever saw him and ruled him out. He was just one of many oddballs in the area. But I mean, yeah, guys like Francis Tumblety, and I mean, they weren't actually. He wasn't considered a suspect at the time the murders took place. There was very few people to go on. You had John Pizer was essentially pretty much the only suspect, unless you consider somebody like Jacob Eisenschmidt and these kind of people who were suspects at the time as the case was going on. And yeah, I think Albert Backett just flew under the radar the entire time. And yeah, I think if this was happening today, he's the guy you'd want to go and speak to. Yeah.
You know, and they just, I mean, obviously I'm a huge Morrissey fan. And my
I've seen that on Instagram, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm writing it, and it's called "There's Something About Whitechapel." He stood on the stage in 2005 and he said, "There's something about Whitechapel, not much, but something." And you know, if it's not about Jack the Ripper, it's about the Cray twins, it's about Joseph Merrick, it's about the Freak Show. There's so much, and you know, even now, 15, 16, 17 years on, you've been in the East End. If you find there's something magical about the East End, there's so many different cultures, so many different religions. You know, 50, 55 years, the Crays were about. These days, they wouldn't listen to the two tasty geezers who won the snooker hall because they don't even speak English. And the East End now it's you know, it's probably 3 times the size. And yeah, does it still have that kind of buzz for you, Mick, when you're walking up and down the East End?
It does, especially if you're into the history. I think a lot of the history is kind of dark history.
Jelly beans, pie and mash.
It's like, yeah, no, I love all that kind of the Cockney culture. A lot of the history, though, I think in the East End, it's like when he says the Crays and Jack the Ripper and the Elephant Man and these kind of things, they're always kind of dark history stories. But there's also loads of other stuff. I mean, for 500 and odd years, everybody that's been coming to London is largely piled in the East End. So now you've got a giant mix of everybody. If you went back in Victorian times, it was like mix everybody. Something I think that's kind of cool about that when you live here is you get to see and sample all sorts of other things you wouldn't normally do. And it's I definitely get used to it.
In Middlesbrough, probably the most notable person ever to come from Middlesbrough was Captain James Cook. And of course, he was famous for basically moving as far away as possible to the other side of the world, away from Middlesbrough. But you know when he come back from halfway across the world, do you know he moved to Marland Road and spent the rest of his days in the East End?
I had heard that before, yes. I couldn't, when you say that, I'm convinced you're right, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you off the top of my head. I had heard that he was living in Marland Road because I saw an old picture. Right, yeah. There was his house, and I don't think it's there anymore, but I think there's a plaque that says, you know, on this site is where he used to live. I haven't seen it yet, but I did see that online.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions for you, Mick, then. So I was there in August. It fascinates me. I got the picture of the 10 bells. That's Lee Shelley. Mick, the Mongoose Graham. London is brilliant. I live there. Jeb Avenue. So any other questions you want me to ask Mick? But if anyone fancies this book, I'm going to put the link in the bio. I'm going to share this video, Mick, to all the Jack the Ripper pages, so there'll be lots watching.
Wonderful.
So there's 2 books MP Priestley's done. I've read one's fantastic, passed it over to Martin O'Neill, and I'm about 2/3 into this, Mick, and I'm going to give this to Martin as well. So what's the plans for you? What's the plans for you now? Are you just going to continue more and more Jack the Ripper? Oh, sorry. Our Soul said, any thoughts on David Cohen as a suspect, Mick?
I tell you, David Cohen is, who was it wrote a book recently? There was somebody who wrote a book about David Cohen. Was it, who was it? There was somebody I was talking to recently and they said, was it Martin Fido? Did Martin Fido write a book about David Cohen? Or something about
Martin Fido died a couple of years back. So
I'm aware he died a couple of years ago, but it was, it mustn't have been somebody. There was somebody who was quite a big name in that Riparology circuit. I'm sure he'd written something about David Cohen. It's a rare one that I don't know too much about him. I'd have to do a bit of research on David Cohen, but he is a name among hundreds of others that you don't hear that one very often on the tour. Usually when people say, oh, I think I know who the killer is, you hear the Montague Drewitts and the George Chapmans and the Walter Sickerts. David Cohen, I'd have to do some research on him, but it is a name I've heard somewhere in the back of my head before. I think somebody's definitely written a book.
It was Martin Fido.
Yeah.
He's done the book. Because what they're saying is he was a Polish Jew and Kosminski was pretty harmless. Yes, he attacked his sister with a chair, but he seems to think that they got mixed up. And yes, it said Kosminski in Swanson's book, but he was really thinking of David Cohen. That's Martin Fido's philosophy, God rest him. Mick, can I ask you a question? Does it wind you up when people say, oh, yeah, I know it was the royal family, when that didn't come out till 90 years after the murders?
To be honest, I think, I just think if somebody's read the book that says the royal family did it or whatever, yeah, it's a load of nonsense. I know that, you know that. But I think anything that gets people into the case is always a good thing. So I think when you get people come along on the tour, if they were to say, oh, I know who it was the royal family, you can tell by the look on his face, that he's really into it though. He's read about it. He's excited to be here. So it's yeah, I think in a weird way, if it wasn't for the 1976 Stephen Knight Final Solution, which pretty much certainly popularized the royal family theory. I think if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you doing this interview. We'd probably not be. It wouldn't. I think that whole theory got a whole new generation of people interested in the case again. But yeah, I mean, it's a load of nonsense, that theory. It only came forward in that one book. Because of that theory, there's the pre and post 1976 Jack the Ripper. There's the Jack the Ripper from back in the day, who the police say was a local man living in this immediate area, drinking in the local pubs and doing his murders on the way home, living somewhere in the immediate area. Then there's the Hollywood guy after 1976 with his top hat and his doctor's bag and his royal family connections and his horse and cart and all the Freemasonry stuff that, yeah, nobody said at the time. I just think it's great that people get interested in the case.
Don't forget the smog. With Jack the Ripper, it's in the small print. You must have smog and mist around you.
Oh, constant rolling fog, apparently. The weather was very much the same as it is today, but everybody seems to have this idea. Yeah, you had more pollution and stuff with in certain places. You have chimneys pumping out filth everywhere. But yeah, everybody always has this idea that it was a constant rolling fog all the time. Whenever you see those then and now London pictures, you never see it and it's rolling fog everywhere, do you? But everybody seems to think that. I think it's because they watch movies.
Yeah, you know, I mean, of course, the royal theory come along, but you know, don't forget it was the Michael Caine film in the centenary, 1888. That really, for me, that was when I first come across this. Like, I watched the film as a 10, 11-year-old in 1991, and I got the bug. Hang on, did you either see the comparisons of Tumblety's handwriting on his personal letters versus the handwriting on the From Hell letter? What are your thoughts, Mick?
Well, I mean, the From Hell letter, medical opinion was divided on there at the time. People seem to think that the From Hell letter, for those who don't know, it arrived on the 16th of October, 1888. It was addressed to a man called George Lusk, who was the leader of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. And inside, whoever had written this was claiming to be the killer, and there was a box inside that claimed that contained what the killer was claiming was part of Catherine Eddowes' kidney. But the doctors were real divided on that. So you had Dr. Brown, who did the autopsy of Catherine Eddowes. He said that he thought it was, in fact, a human kidney in there, but he thought it had come from a dead body at the mortuary or somebody, and some guy had stolen this. Dr. Saunders thought it was a pig kidney. George Lusk, who actually received the letter, spent the rest of his days believing it was a practical joke and somebody had sent along. It was one of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Jack the Ripper letters at the time. And I think as much as people nowadays, if it did indeed have her kidney in it, it's totally from the killer. But it doesn't necessarily, there's not really a great deal of evidence to say that that definitely was the case. I think I haven't seen the comparison between Tumblety's handwriting and the From Hell letter. But to be honest, I think the From Hell letter is largely seen by most people to kind of be a big red herring anyway. There were hundreds of letters, all in different handwriting. And then the whole graphology thing today is kind of, is it a bit of a pseudoscience? I'm not sure that stands up in court anymore. But yes, I have.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, there's a slight delay, isn't there? I thought you were going to say something. It's like, no, I haven't seen the thing, but I think I mean, there's almost no evidence really to tie someone like Tumblety to the case. Yeah, and I haven't seen the comparison between the two, but the police at the time largely believed that the From Hell letter was almost certainly a hoax, along with the rest of them.
I mean, you know something. I mean, I was obviously I had about a week down there, and I actually went to George Lusk's home just off Marland Road, and in the film it comes across as kind of temperamental, aggressive, but the real life George Lusk was quite a mild-mannered personality, apparently.
He was indeed, yeah. He used to work at the church and everything. He was, he's always kind of portrayed as this sort of mean, tough guy kind of figure. But no, he's never actually, in the original files and reports that you can read of him, there's nothing really to suggest that. He seemed like a fairly mild-mannered kind of guy.
Yeah, do you know the guy who played him in the film? He killed himself the year after, you know.
Did he really? In the Michael Caine movie?
Yeah, he
no, I never knew that.
He said he had a lot of issues regarding playing the part. So another question for you. So went to all the streets, Fournier Street, Hanbury Street. It's a seedy, rough area now. I tell you what, it's a millionaires area now, isn't it, Mick?
It is. So I think I always say you probably couldn't afford it in Victorian times, and you probably couldn't afford it now. It's like the house prices, if you were to buy one in that Spitalfields area, yeah, it would be huge. And you think 3.5. Well, I'm still 3.5 to 4. I bet there are £5 million plus houses around there. And if I took you walking around there now, people would say, "How can that be worth 4-5 million?" But it's, I mean, it's a 300-year-old grade to listed building in Zone 1 Central. People are kind of rough, but they're listed and protected, so you can't really change that. On the inside, it'll be quite nice. And it's, yeah, but when I'm walking around telling you about the horrible things that happened here, and here's the original buildings, they do have a sort of creepy, sort of intimidating kind of vibe. But it's like, yeah, I bet if you went into those, you'd probably be surprised at how flash they are on the inside.
And you know something as well, all the films have been filmed there. Angelina Jolie's been in films, Downton Abbey, Luther. So, I mean, when you're, obviously, this is your bread and butter, Mick, you're walking around the East End, do you often see films, companies, and do you see stars around there much?
Not so much stars, but you do see a lot of filming going on. So I did see, I can't remember his name, it was the guy, Robson and Jerome, that was in Ripper Street. They were filming Ripper Street one time when we did a tour. I went past there, they were filming, to be honest, all the time. There's always like random TV things, anything that you see that is Jack the Ripper or Victorian London or whatever, they always tend to film them sort of between Spitalfields, and there's bits of Hoxton and Hackney, and there's a lot of like those old 300-year-old streets. So they basically, if you live there, they'll give you a backhander. You put your car around the corner, sail off the street, put this stuff down, looks like dirt and cobbles, get your bowler hat on, and away you go. You're back in the 1700s. So all the time they'll be filming around there.
Can I ask just a couple more questions, Mick? So London, they say, is one of the most haunted cities in London. Now, back in the Autumn of Terror, London was the richest city in the world. And you go in Whitechapel, you literally couldn't get any bottom, low in society. Jack London come and written a book about 1901, I think it was, and he called his book The People of the Abyss. And you know, do you ever, when you're walking around Mitre Square and all that, have you had any kind of unnatural, spooky feelings or seen any ghosts?
No, I can't say I have. But yeah, I have had people on the tour though who claim that they've had visions and things like that. I don't know. Or you get a lot of people come on the tour and they're well interested in the ghost stories, and all the time, oh, is this haunted? Is that haunted? I'm real skeptical with ghosts. I'm the true crime guy. Like where's all the caveman ghosts? You never see them. Well, why do you never see a naked ghost? Why would your clothes have an afterlife? Why don't your socks come back to haunt you? I don't like. Yeah, I haven't seen them personally, but I have heard people claim that, oh, it must be spooky down there. But no, I can't say I've seen it personally.
You know, obviously, you know, a lot of the East End was bombed in the 1940s and World War II. And even now, you know, 133 years on from 1888, London's changed so much. But if you look closely, there's still bits. I mean, obviously, walking up Brick Lane, you can see the Frying Pan pub, and Gunthorpe Street, the White Hart pub. You know, there's so much in the East End. If you really stare and look about, I find it really sad. Last couple of years, I've been in Mitre Square. The bricks were there exactly, and then as I went this year, they'd gone. You know, slowly but surely, it's gone. And do you find that sad, Mick?
I suppose so, but it's like I mean, sooner or later everything disappears, and you often get, when you're doing the walking tour, I often have people say, oh, it's all different now and this kind of thing. But I always say, if the whole walking tour was, we just walked around the East End pointing out all the buildings that were there 200 years ago, easily a quarter of the stuff I think is, like I said, the Frying Pan, pretty much everything on Brick Lane. If you go down Commercial Road or Commercial Street, both of those are overwhelmingly Victorian or pre-Victorian. But I think people often think that if you see a Victorian or pre-Victorian building, they think it's going to look like some crumbling relic from medieval times. And it's not even that long ago, really. I mean, a lot of the stuff's still there. A lot of it does change, but everything disappears sooner or later. When they built those 1700s houses, somebody will have complained that they knocked down those beautiful 1500s ones to do it. And a couple hundred years' time, there'll be a guy doing a walking tour past the Shard going, look how old it is. Oh, my God. You know, sooner or later, everything changes. But if you came to the East End looking to see the Victorian vibe, it's very much still there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, out the murder scenes, obviously Berners Street, which is now Henrique Street.
Mhm.
I find something really eerie about that, and you know, and obviously you've got Batty Street next to it, and you know, kind of, I mean, Mitre Square. Every time I'm in London, I'll just sit there for an hour or two and just, you know, it's kind of, it's almost surreal to me. You think I'm walking in spaces where, oh, so many people. London. I mean, that was a Samuel Johnson quote which said, "When a man's bored of London, he's bored of life." And there's so much to do in London. There's some of the greatest people in the world were around London. You know, Lemon Street and just some of the streets you mentioned earlier. And it's quite sad, but you know, one of the pubs I think you mentioned when I was down was it the Hope and Grapes, and that was actually made something like 23 years before Henry VIII was about. And that pub actually survived the Great Fire of London in 1666.
It did. It's the Hoop and Grapes. It's on Aldgate High Street. It's been there since 1593. So when they opened it, Elizabeth I was on the throne, and the 23 years. I think I must have told you, it was Shakespeare could have drank there for 23 years before he died. So, and it is also it's the only wood frame building still standing in the city of London which survived the Great Fire of London, mainly because the fire ended at the end of the street, so it was never actually on fire, but it was standing there at the time. And it's still there right now. It's an amazing place. If you go in, everything above ground is from 1593. Everything below, like the toilets and the beer cellars or whatever, are from the 1200s when the original pub was built there. It's a real time capsule, that pub. There's a few of them as well, like the Prospect of Whitby down in Wapping has been there since 1520. The White Hart on the High Street is 300 years old this year. It's like, there's a whole lot of really old pubs down there, especially when you get further down the river. Then they're all 1500s, and Henry VIII was on the throne when they opened those ones.
Wow, incredible. Well, listen, Mick, do you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure. Listen, so if anyone's listening to this and they want to get in touch, you've got a massive, massive Instagram page, haven't you? So tell us, how can people contact you?
I'd be on Instagram. If you find MP Priestley, Priestley on Instagram. Message me on Instagram, I'll send you one out, or you can get riparworld.net or at etsy.com. Jack the Ripper, one autumn in Whitechapel, and I can send it straight out to you. But yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch, add MP Priestley on Instagram, and yeah, I'm there.
So if anyone would like to book a Jack the Ripper tour by your good self, so they're just get in touch with you, MP Priestley. You've got a massive page, something like 25,000, is that right?
Something like that. I think it's nearly 24 now. I think we're getting there, slowly getting a few there.
And obviously you constantly update it on Jack the Ripper things. And and regarding your books, 2 fantastic books, where can they buy them?
Well, if somebody wants to do the tour, if they go to thejackthерippertour.com, and that's us. We're the Jack the Ripper Tour with Ripper Vision. So if you go on thejackthерippertour.com, if you book it on there, if you send an email, and if you want to specifically come with me, just say you want to go with Mick, and people can book it on there. It's £15 to come on the tour. People can book it on there. If people want a copy of the book, you can get them off me if you happen to come on the tour, or send me a message on Instagram. We can sort it out. Or if you go on etsy.com, One Autumn in Whitechapel is on there. It's also on my website at riparworld.net.
Right. Well, listen, I'm going to put them links in this video. It's been an absolute pleasure, Mick. And I'm going to be in London in the new year, so I'll definitely catch up with you, mate. And
yeah, give me a ring. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be a fantastic addition to my book. There's something about Whitechapel. I don't know as much about Jack the Ripper as you do, but this book's more, it touches on the East End, Apples and Pears, Chas and Dave, West Ham, just lots of cockney stuff. And I'd be absolutely honoured if we can speak in the new year.
Oh, yeah, sounds great. Give me a call. I'm always around.
Absolute pleasure, Mick. Thanks for your time. God bless.
Nice one, Jamie. Have a good night.